Hello and welcome to 1v1 with Siphon. I'm your host, Eric Siphon McMullen. I'm a naval flight officer in Rio from the F-14D Super Tomcat community, including several hundred hours of combat time with the VF-31 Tomcatters, as well as being qualified in the F-18F Super Hornet. My naval career spanned from the very tactical all the way up to the strategic. But for this show, brought to you in partnership with Combat Aviationist, let's go 1v1. Well, hi, I'm Siphon. This is 1v1 with Siphon, and we are here today with Dave Bayo Baranek. Nice to have you here, Bayo.
Hey, Siphon, nice to be here.
Thank you.
I think we're going to talk about Tomcats, right? So I'm happy to be here.
Let's do the Tomcat talk. Absolutely. I could talk about this all day. So this is our inaugural program, and I wanted to thank you for being our very first guest. So I appreciate that. I'm calling this 1v1 based on going back to the idea of what we do in the fighter community. It all comes back to being able to mix it up in a telephone booth as you need to sometimes. And we call that a 1v1. And not that this is an adversarial relationship, but it certainly lends a hand to the idea of what we're doing here. So I want to talk about your call sign, actually. First things first. When you enter the Tomcat community, at least it was the experience for me, I had a couple call signs. I had one in flight school that didn't stick, obviously, and then I had one in the RAG that obviously didn't stick either. And then when you show up at your squadron, you get a real call sign. And then if you do something stupid, you may get some more. And I recall in your book that you talked about a couple opportunities in your life when you thought, I might get a call sign out of this. But for you, Bayo, going back to 1981, one of the really popular shows back then, I remember when I was a kid, was the $6 Million Man, the Bionic Man. So
right.
Talk to me about how you got your call sign.
So I know there's different stories online, and different communities have different processes about how a person gets a call sign. But when I was joining the fleet, I finished the RAG in 1981, and the instructors informally told us, start thinking about what you want your call sign to be. So
what you want your call sign to be.
What you want they said, what do you want it to be? So a lot of guys were going, oh, I want to be Tiger or Killer or something like that,
Sure.
So I thought rather than be, the most aggressive and assertive person, I would go a little bit clever. And so I thought about my last name, Baranek, rhymes with bionic. So I said, I want my call sign to be Bionic. So I consulted with one of my RAG instructors, and he was a Rio, and his call sign was Superman. And that was his real call sign. And
really?
Yeah. So that shows you what high esteem he was held in.
Nice.
And actually the main reason he got it was because he looked like Clark Kent, but also he was a good dude. And so Superman, he had that call sign.
So he lived it up all the way.
Yeah. So he said, I think Bionic's good. You ought to go with that. So I walk over to VF-24 a couple of weeks later, and they asked me and my buddies, who showed up the same day, what are you guys' call signs? So, we told them what our call sign was. I said Bionic, and they go, okay. So I start flying with this guy, John Boy, and after just, a couple of flights, he goes, I can't call you Bionic. So
that's not going to work for me.
I was an ensign. I was 6'2" and 165 pounds. So it was very skinny, and Bionic sounded terrible on the radio. It just didn't come out right.
Oh, yeah.
So he shortened it to Bio, and that stuck. And I go, okay, I'll take it.
Wow.
Now, I'll reveal something since this is your first show.
Excellent. Hey, we'll love it.
A couple of years later in the fleet, I had an embroidered flight suit, and it said BIO, but it was hand embroidered in the Philippines.
Yeah.
And they did a nice job, but it wasn't the computer precision. And so I was up in the tower one day, standing in the Pry-Fly watch, and the air boss looked at me and he goes, VF-24 rep. He goes, B10. He looked at my flight suit that said BIO and he said B10.
B10.
There. Okay, well, I thought it was funny.
Yeah.
I knew I was telling on myself, but I went down to the ready room and I told my squadron mates that story. And so about half the time they called me B10 for a few years.
Call signs are a funny thing. They're kind of a living thing.
Right.
I suspect you saw the same thing. It certainly has become the case in the community now that you really don't get a call sign until you do something stupid. They'll actually call you FNG, and the new guy, NG is new guy, but I'm not going to say what the F stands for. They call you FNG for as long as they need to until you do something stupid.
Yeah, I've been involved in giving people a few people call signs. I wasn't really a great guy to, I named these guys and these guys. I think I gave a couple of them, but it's best in my experience. I thought it was good that it was an iterative process.
Mhm.
It was a living process. A new guy in a squadron may go through a couple before one, sticks and things like that.
Yeah.
I've heard of other processes where it's very formal, and I said, well, that's not what I'm used to.
That's pretty cool. I don't remember many call signs that were quite as cool as Superman. That's most of these days seem to be the more they embarrass you, the better.
Oh yeah. I mean, even back then we had plenty of guys that had call signs that you wouldn't want to tell your grandmother, or
Yeah, or right on the side of a plane.
Yes.
Well, thank you much for that story. I appreciate that.
Yeah, sure.
Next thing I wanted to talk to you about was in your book, your newest book, Tomcat Rio, which we'll show a picture of, I'm sure. You have a section in the back that's the glossary, and I love it. It actually does a pretty nice job of explaining some concepts and ideas, not just the words, and I like that a lot. One of those complicated concepts that we have in aviation is called SA, situational awareness, and it's part of the 7 core skills of crew resource management. It's one of the 7, and it's I would say one of the most important. So tell me, for you, what SA means. How does it mean in terms of your own personal concept, but also how you can share SA, how you can gain or lose SA? Just talk about that some. Maybe some examples of when that happened in your flying career.
Okay, sure. One note about my glossary, it was kind of fun writing the glossary because I was able to unload some explanations. In the text, I would have like a very brief explanation, but I would put more detail in the glossary. And then I also have to credit my editor, Dave Robinson, with helping me make sure it was inclusive and also entertaining. He kept saying, a little bit more, a little bit more.
Yeah.
Okay. So SA, situational awareness. One of the most, in my thought, one of the most basic definitional meanings of that term is if you're running a multi-aircraft intercept and you have, spatial awareness, or you have the picture, where you are, where the defended area is, or the defended resources, where the enemy is, where, SAMs are and things like that. That's like, a tactical kind of SA. And really, if you're going to be a fighter guy, that you got to have that. And that's got to be fundamental. But then there's more maybe subtle, but very important forms of SA. And that is, you got to have a good idea of exactly what your mission is and take some actions based on your mission. And I'll just kind of simplify it a little bit. And this, you have to put yourself in a, multi-threat, complex environment, the likes that we haven't seen in decades. But think back to a Vietnam Alpha strike with enemy MiGs airborne defending, or maybe the first night on Gulf War I when there were Iraqi aircraft airborne.
So you're talking about the kind of things we practice at Air Wing Fallon, where you've got basically 32 versus, I don't know, something like 10 or 15.
Air Wing Fallon is an excellent example these days.
Mhm.
When I was a junior officer, air wing Fallon just wasn't that challenging, and now it's very challenging. But that is a good example. You know, if you're the HVU cap defending the EA-6B, and you get a radar contact on some guy that's 60 miles away doing something else, you don't strip and go after that guy because that's not your mission.
Mhm.
I mean, that's just a simplistic example of SA.
Mhm.
Another example is, you know, if the strike group is leaving the strike and they're, you know, it's Miller time,
Mhm.
and you get a contact, you know, 80 miles away headed your way. Well, you know, do you want to go over there and get your kill?
Yeah, take the commit because we're already on our way out. Yeah.
Right. Or do you have to, and there were cases, some of the MiG kills in Vietnam came from guys who did
Mhm.
stuff like that. But of course, you know, many of them came later in the war or whatever. It was an unusual environment. So all of those judgment decisions are SA.
Mhm.
You know, you may be the guy that goes, hey, we need to start attriting these guys in the air, or we need to do
Mhm.
this. Yeah, you're damn straight. I'm taking this commit, you know,
Mhm.
strike group. Nice job. I'm going to get these to shoot these bandits down.
If they're going to be stupid enough to come up on us now, we've got the weapons and the SA to do it. Let's take it, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So SA means a lot. It can mean a lot of things like that to me. Is that close to what you guys? Is that close to the book definition or the doctrinal definition that you were thinking of?
Yeah, sort of informally, the definition we use now is SA is the degree to which your perception of reality matches reality. Um,
Man,
so, you
that's
know,
good. I like that. That's good.
there is this thing called reality, and you know there are these planes here and these planes here and this stuff on the ground, and there's this amount of fuel and this amount of time remaining, and all of those things are pieces of the puzzle, but obviously you can't know all of them.
Right.
And so, does your perception of that closely match that? Hopefully, yes.
Very good.
Yeah. So, have you had any times? I'm sure. Well, no, I'm not. I'm going to rat on myself a little bit. I know there have been some times in my life, in my flying career, when I had low SA, and they often didn't go well, but then they were often saved by someone else who had high SA. So whether they be my pilot or my section lead, if I was not lead, hopefully I was not the section lead with low SA.
Okay, I can tell you. I'll tell you a bad story about myself, and then I'll tell
Sure.
you a good story about
Sure,
myself.
sure.
The bad story was when I was in my first squadron tour, VF-24, and I wasn't a nugget anymore. I'd already been on a deployment. We were over in the Yuma tax range for FARP, which was just air to air,
Mm.
and we'd run through the range. I don't think we got engaged. We were bugging out, and I got a visual on I got a tally on some contacts at our right 4 o'clock. Well, I called for our fighters to turn
Mm-hmm.
right and engage.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just stupid because the guys, they were not a factor.
Mm-hmm.
The rules of FARP were, you know, one thing. We should not have engaged them. And in the end, we turned to engage them and got in a fur ball and just barely escaped with our lives.
Yeah. And that's one of those experiences where I'm sure in the debrief, your SA went through the roof and you went, oh.
Well, we were already mentally bugging out, and I just saw these guys and I just, you know, said, oh, let's get in there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we had fun, but it was in a competition that's risky. Mm-hmm. So then, you know, years later in my second tour, when I was in VF2, you know, one of my favorite stories was when we got tired of following the rules for FARP. And so we decided to pull the circuit breakers, turn off our pods, come in at very low altitude, off axis. Mm. So we had 2 Tomcats coming in at high altitude from the typical northwest corner of the range. Mm-hmm. And then I was in a section that went down to the southern border, US-Mexico border, and then came in about 30 or 40 degrees off. Mm. And we had radars off, or excuse me, we had pods off, so we weren't getting any GCI. And so I had to use my SA to to make the turn from the border
Mhm.
to which heading we came to when we turned back into the range, and then get us set up to make the intercept.
Mhm.
Well, that time it worked out well. We came in with our radars looking high. We detected them, put our pods back in, pod circuit breakers back in, came
Mhm.
back online, and got the shots and got the kills. So that
Mhm.
was good essay.
Yeah, and that's one of those scenarios where you had a good mental picture that you could match up against what you were hearing and then what
Yeah,
you were seeing.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
And that
sometimes go
that
ahead.
situation is actually that's exactly what this illustration is.
There we go. Excellent. That's nice to know. You came in like the sneaky guy and you're like, "Well, this is exactly what we're supposed to do." Nice. Nice. Cool. Well, thank you for that. Wanted to talk a little bit about one of the pictures that's in the book here. It's a those who are familiar with the movie Top Gun will recall there's a period of time in there where the the protagonists, shall we say, are communicating with the foreign jet, and they're doing the cockpit to cockpit communicating.
Yes.
And you guys replicated that with a couple Tomcats at one point and took a picture of it. So tell us how that happened and what the immediate implications were and what the follow-on later implications were.
So when we did that picture, we were more thinking of just a mirror pass,
Hmm.
which was fairly common. It's something the Blue Angels had done. There have been a few Tomcat squadrons that did it. We weren't really trying to recreate the Top Gun scene.
Mhm.
We were just thinking of a mirror pass.
Mhm.
And so we did some mirror pass photos. And then the one of the pilots goes, "Hey, let's extend the landing gear." So both the upright and the inverted aircraft both had their gear extended.
Mm.
It just looks strange, and as you can say, as you said, you know, you can look at the picture and it just looks kind of strange. Well, I took the picture, we got the pictures back, and we go, "Oh, that looks interesting." So I'm going, "Okay, well, let's get a little press." So I sent
Mhm.
it into the Tailhook magazine,
Mhm.
and they published it. You
Mhm.
know, they go like, "Oh, you know, thanks, Bio, thanks for sending this in." They published it, and at this time we were on deployment,
Mm.
on a 6-month deployment. So we get home from the deployment, the magazine comes out, and about 2 weeks later, we get a phone call from the fighter wing at Miramar, ComFit, AEW Wing Pack, and they said, you know, VF2 send over some lieutenants. We want to talk about this picture. Well, so I went over with this other lieutenant, one of the pilots, and then actually three of us, and the ComFit chief of staff, who was an '06, who had no sense of humor, goes, "Did you guys
Those two
take this
things don't
picture?"
necessarily go together.
Yep. "Did you guys take this picture?" "Yes, sir." "Did you know you're violating NATOPS?" "What?" And he had looked at the F-14 NATOPS, and it says you can't have the landing gear extended for the gear limit is 0G. It's like plus 1G and 0G.
Oh.
And he goes, "You were inverted. That's negative 1G." And the two pilots and I look at each other and go like, "Oh, hey, he's kind of got a point there."
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
But we weren't about to admit that to his face, you know.
Right.
So we just started just kind of like, "Well, sir, really, we're in level flight and blah, blah, blah." And he just goes, "Get out of here." So we walked out and we go, "Man, that was dumb." But we got away with it. So
Anything that doesn't kill you makes you better, right?
yes, we learned. Exactly. See that, thus proving what you just said. Yes.
Sometimes attention is a good thing. They say, you know, there's no such thing as bad press, but well, that's good. That's cool. Yeah, I can't say we ever did a photo like that, but I definitely remember doing some uh, getting some photographic evidence that we realized afterwards we should not share.
Well, Siphon, that happened in other squadrons also. Guys were really low, taking some pictures, and the skipper saw them and said, "I want the pictures. I want the negatives,"
Mm,
just because it looked bad.
mm,
And now, you know, there's videos and
oh
YouTube
yeah,
and excuse me, and GoPros and all this.
yeah.
And I just, I hope guys think before they go out there and take that, spectacular image, because you could
Yeah.
get in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah. I've actually even this, I don't know if you can see this picture over my shoulder here.
Yeah.
We're super low there. That's me there. Super low. It's out at Fallon, but it's taken from the top of Fairview Peak.
That's a
So they're
good picture.
looking
I mean, I
down.
could, I could see it in here. That's a good picture.
Yeah, it's a really neat picture. There were 3 or 4 photographers up on the peak at the time, and we were the only aircraft on the range, so we were all they had to take pictures of. But a couple people have seen that picture and been like, okay, what rule were you breaking here? In actuality, we were not. It just looks, it's a really neat perspective. So that's what's kind of unusual about that. So yeah, you're right. I mean, unfortunately today, you can't get away with the things maybe you used to because everyone's got a photo.
Well, there were a couple of incidents at Miramar, and for a while they clamped down on taking cameras in airplanes and taking pictures. But actually, the clampdown really what it said was you need to get your CO's permission to have a camera in the plane,
Yeah, I
and you
remember.
need to brief any photo X's. So
Mm.
it was not unreasonable,
Hmm.
given that there had been some mishaps
Hmm.
due to taking pictures.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm thinking, back when you were specifically when you were beginning flying, but even a little bit later, digital cameras weren't a thing, obviously back then, and so the size of the camera was significant, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. 35 millimeter camera was, I mean, it wasn't that bad,
Hmm.
but yeah, it wasn't as slick as the little digital cameras and stuff now.
Yeah, I don't want to call this an endorsement, but hold on for a second. This is it didn't have a little strap on it. My daughter borrowed this. I'm just sure this probably won't make anything, by the way. But I actually flew with this camera. This was in my sleeve pocket
Uh,
pretty much all the time.
yeah, that's
This
good.
takes HD video, and this is even before cell phones had good video. But I put a lot of time on that camera. I had it actually, idiot string to my knee board so I wouldn't drop it.
Yeah.
Um, the FOD string basically. But yeah, it
Oh
was
yeah.
nice to be able to do that on a moment's notice and have it just there. I had a little case on my leg strap.
Well,
So,
I
yeah.
carried my camera almost every flight, but there
Mm,
were a few flights I did not carry it. I mean, for example, when I was going through the Top Gun class for 5 weeks, I
yeah,
did not have a camera in the cockpit with me
right. Distracting.
yeah, I didn't want any distraction at all. And,
Mhm.
a few other flights like that.
Did did you actually just put it in your helmet bag, or
Yeah.
what did you do with
Yeah.
that?
I didn't worry about it.
Hmm.
Actually, I got a camera case, a padded case that
Hmm.
fit a camera and a zoom lens. So,
Hmm.
but I didn't worry about mine too much. Actually, a guy who loaned me his Nikon when I was a junior officer, he goes, Bio, he goes, you handle a camera like a shovel. Sorry, I'll be more careful with your Nikon.
It's just a Nikon. It's not mine anyway, right?
Yeah.
That photo, another photo in your book there. It's a real one of those real nice photos. It's the merged picture. We'll throw that picture in there too. We won't just use my hands, but the picture of the merge there. I guess lots of people have seen either that photo or there's one other I'm familiar with that's kind of like that, and people don't realize to do that. Of course, you have to have 3 jets there, so you can't take a picture of 2 jets without having a third jet. That's a
Yes.
complicated picture to get.
Oh, I've had, so one, they have not seen that picture because this is the first time that picture's been published. And the reason is to get it to be good quality, to be in this book, I had to do some cleanup in Photoshop. It took a
Okay.
little bit of work, but
Okay.
it is a real picture. I mean, that's exactly what happened. But several times since it's come out, people have asked me and they've said, okay, where are you?
Right. I'm taking the picture.
Yeah, and I go, I'm in a jet flying next to this guy. But when we briefed it, also somebody said, where do you want to be? Do you want to be, and for me it was just obvious. You fly in formation with the one airplane and the other guy comes at you. But one of the guys in the brief wasn't clear on how we would do it. And they go, how are we going to get all 3 planes in the same place at the same time? And I go, no, it's not that hard.
Just think of it as a 2v1 merge. That's all it is. except the other two is not in the fight. Yeah, it's a really neat picture. Um, Talk to me a little bit, kind of hitting on the idea of SA. So you flew primarily the A
Yes.
version of the Tomcat, and so that did have Link 4 Alpha, or no?
It did.
Yeah. And when you're taking a deck launched intercept, you have that SA before you launch off, of where the general target is. No, you're
We had
not.
a
Okay.
vector board, man. We had a
Okay.
sailor come out with a vector board
Uh-huh.
that said, 020 at 120 or whatever.
Okay.
And he held it up and you looked at it down there.
Okay.
Because one, maybe we were zip lip and everything was shut down.
Sure.
But I wasn't sitting, if it was a DLI, deck launch intercept, you would be sitting cold on the flight deck, and then you'd start up, and I don't remember having a lot of value out of Link 4 back in my days, and maybe part of that is my own training, that it was, not that useful or something like that. But Siphon, I'll admit this, it's kind of like I was talking to a guy about TCS, the television camera set. And again, in my, those things sound like great SA builders, but in my real life experience, I just didn't use them a lot.
No, I'm with you. I know exactly what you mean. Of course, for those no one's seen these video series yet because we just started. I'm a D baby. So these are D Tomcats. We had Link 16, which is a very different system than Link 4 Alpha. We actually did have a lot of SA provided by Link 16. And so it's interesting to hear that difference from you. But I agree with you certainly on TCS. There were plenty of times when we were trying to do a VID, if we had a good track on the radar, and we said, okay, bore sight my TCS to that to try to get a VID, either the contrast wasn't very good and you really couldn't see anything, or even though it was quote unquote bore sighted, it wasn't looking at the thing you were looking at, and so there wasn't really much there. Or you're so busy managing the intercept, you really don't have time to go look at the TCS picture.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, it sounds like it's going to really be a great tool. And I mean, that's why they put it in the plane, because guys called for it. But in my real world experience, I just don't remember getting a lot out of it. TCS. So,
and I can imagine again in the A or A and B, where the cockpit, the rear cockpit was a different layout, and you really only had the one display to look at. I actually had a couple of other displays I can pull up on. I had a multifunction display, and so there were times when if I knew I was doing a VID, I'd put the TCS up on that MFD, replacing what I would normally be looking at on the MFD, but at least it was some SA that I could get while still managing the picture on my tactical information display. So yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of it's training too. I mean, if I had made a point to train to those things, but you train to what you need. And right. I don't recall coming back from many intercepts going, God, I wish I'd used my TCS.
Yeah, it's the regret of the TCS. That's not a thing you hear about that much. Yeah. So we're actually pretty close to our time here, so I wanted to just maybe ask you one more question. And I want to take you forward to your squadron command time.
Yeah.
Different experience flying the Tomcat as the commander of the squadron. I certainly don't have that experience, so I can't begin to speak to that. But I just kind of wanted to ask you, did it change your perspective on flight to be the commanding officer?
Yes. And I have to attribute that to one of the junior officers that I was flying with when I was the XO, when I was, as the executive officer waiting to become the commanding officer. And man, I was just happy to be back in Tomcats. This guy was a strong JO, even though he was a nugget. And we manned up the jet one day and he goes, XO, you love flying, don't you? And I mean, that just hit me like a slap in the face. I'm going like, gosh, do I seem like a happy puppy, like a carefree? And it just brought all my responsibility into my full awareness. And that's a good thing,
Mm,
because otherwise I would have just rolled along, I guess, until something happened. And that's kind of like my complacency lesson
mm,
earlier in my career. When I had 1,200 hours, I felt great in the airplane, and the pilot I was flying with was in a similar situation. And then he goes, "Bio, we're complacent," which was
mm,
a wake up call.
mm-hmm.
So as the squadron commander, most of the time when you're in the air, at least for me, and you'd have to survey a dozen COs to find out what their
Yeah, skippers
experience
might
was.
have different perspectives, sure.
Yeah, but for me, most of the time when I was in the air, I was a Rio,
Mm-hmm.
and I was my position, as either flight lead Rio, or since I was often flying with junior officers, we were -2 or -4,
Mm-hmm.
and so I was the -4 Rio
Mm.
most of the time.
Yeah, yeah, and so that does give you a perspective of leadership and of a leadership in the sense of that you're training those people who you're flying with because they need to move up in their capacity as well, and you've got a responsibility not just for the successful accomplishment of that mission if you're doing a division of jets, but you can't do that from the actual -1 position.
Yeah. And I got to tell you, actually, in VF 211, when I was there, we had strong O4
Mm,
and O3, very strong pilots and Rios.
mm-hmm,
And I think that's standard in the fleet. And
mm-hmm,
this for me was 1996 to 98, so that's quite a
mm-hmm.
long time ago now. But I think the fleet has stepped up, and a big part of that is the Strike Fighter Weapons and Tactics program.
Swifty
Uh,
program, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
It is the standardization of that program has really raised the bar,
yeah,
put the game in it for sure.
yep,
And of course, you talk about in the book that coming back to the community uh, that had now really fully embraced or was in the process of fully embracing the air to ground mission was a real eye opener.
that's something else. And again, you can get different opinions from different people, but my opinion is that the Tomcat community did embrace that. And
Mm-hmm,
every once in a while, I'll read a comment by someone who is just trying to throw something out there, and they say the Tomcat guys grudgingly embraced it or whatever. And I'm going like, man, I don't know where you got that information from, because I didn't know what to expect when I came back to the F-14 community in 1996. And I just saw, it's like, okay, this is one of
mm-hmm,
our missions now. Nobody complained. It's just like I'm gonna compliment the junior officers in VF 211. They
mm-hmm,
did not complain about flying F-14As.
mm-hmm,
When they were going out to brief to fight against F-16s, they didn't say, "Oh, I wish we had the big engines." No,
mm-hmm.
they said, "Okay, we're in A's. These guys are this. Here's our game plan." And they went out there and shot them up. So
Just walk the walk, make it
yep,
happen, do
exactly.
it.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, so my first deployment was actually 99. That was the Kosovo activity. And those two squadrons off the Roosevelt, I think it was CAG 8 at that point, right? 14 and 41,
Yeah,
also lovingly known as VF 55 when you put them together. um,
that's good.
they were their very first time deploying with Lantern, first time deploying in the air to ground mission primarily,
Yep.
and they were absolutely eating it up in standard Tomcat fashion. If we're going to do it well.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a good thing to see. So I'm encouraged to hear you talk about even in the implementation as you did that a couple of years before I was flying, that it was already being embraced and they could see the results of that.
Now, on the other hand, I'll take you back to the 80s when we were
Yeah.
strictly air to air. And we would make all kinds of snide comments about the air to ground mission, like, how hard is it to drop a bomb? It always hits the earth.
Right.
And, but, that was then. And then we
Yeah.
changed.
Yeah, yeah. The 1.0 PK,
Exactly.
it will
That's
hit
it.
the earth. Yeah. I don't know
Yep.
even where you want it, but yeah, it's all in the where, not the how, right?
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Bio. I really appreciate your time, and really appreciate you sharing your experiences with us. It is a real blessing. We got to do something really cool, and you got to do a lot of it.
Oh, I agree with you. I feel very fortunate. And Siphon, thank you for having me as your first guest. And I wish you good success with 1v1s with Siphon too.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.